Welcome to Car Ranker. Today we're diving into one of the most controversial lists we've ever made. Not the legendary American cars everyone loves, not the Mustangs, not the Corvettes, not the Camaros. Number. Today we're ranking the top 10 worst American car brands of all time. The brands people mocked, complained about, abandoned, or simply never took seriously. Some of these brands still exist. Some died a slow and painful death. And some were so bad that they became memes in the car world. We're talking about the names that struggled with terrible reliability, outdated designs, cheap interiors, bad marketing, and in some cases, questionable decisions that sent the entire brand straight into the history books. Maybe you owned one, maybe someone in your family had one, or maybe you just saw them on the road and thought, yeah, I'd never buy that. So buckle up, because we're counting down the 10 most disliked, disappointing, and downright failed American car brands ever made. Kicking off our list at number 10 is Buick, a brand that isn't terrible, but one that has struggled for decades with one big problem. Nobody knows who it's actually for. For years, Buick carried the reputation of being an older person's car. Soft suspension, quiet interiors, calm driving, nothing wrong with that. But when the rest of the industry started evolving, Buick didn't keep up. Younger buyers didn't want them, older buyers slowly moved on ve bir noktadan sonra Buick'in kimliği tamamen kayboldu. Not sporty, not exciting, not luxurious, not cheap, just there. Most models felt like slightly nicer Chevrolets, and that hurt the brand even more. Good reliability, yes, but excitement, innovation, passion, not so much. At number 9 is GMC. GMC has gained notoriety by taking Chevy pickup trucks and SUVs, adding a slightly different grille, a bit more chrome, and perhaps a nicer seat, and then charging thousands of dollars more. Of course, models like the Sierra and Yukon are popular, but critics always ask the same question: why not just get the Chevy version and save money? Furthermore, GMC is frequently criticized for outdated interiors, inconsistent build quality, and a lack of genuine luxury compared to true premium brands. The cars aren't terrible, they just don't always justify the extra costs. Coming in at number 8, we have Chrysler, a brand that once stood tall, but today kind of feels like it's running on memories rather than momentum. Here's the issue: Chrysler used to symbolize American luxury and innovation, but over the last decade, the lineup has shrunk so much that many people joke the brand is basically the Chrysler 300 in a minivan. And honestly, they're not wrong. The Chrysler 200, discontinued. The Aspen, gone. The PT Cruiser, let's not even talk about that disaster yet. Meanwhile, every other automaker is pumping out hybrids, EVs, SUVs, and Chrysler is crawling behind like it forgot the race even started. Slow model updates and feeling years behind competitors. And yet Chrysler keeps hanging on, mostly thanks to fleet sales and nostalgia for what the brand used to be. At number 7, we've got Hummer, a brand that became famous, then infamous, and eventually died under the weight of its own reputation. When Hummer first hit the roads, people thought it was the coolest, most unstoppable machine ever made. I mean, it looked like a military tank you could drive to Starbucks. Huge, loud, aggressive, perfect for showing off. But that's exactly where the problem started. A Hummer became the symbol of excess, terrible fuel economy. We're talking single digits, massive size that barely fit in parking spaces, questionable handling, and a ride quality that felt like driving a brick over potholes. Then gas prices went up, environmental criticism exploded, and suddenly, owning a Hummer wasn't cool anymore. It was embarrassing. People began calling it the most unnecessary car ever built, the gas-guzzling dinosaur, the car that hates the planet. Sales tanked fast, and by 2010, GM shut the brand down completely. Yes, the electric Hummer EV brought the name back, but the original reputation is so strong that many people still roll their eyes when they hear Hummer. At number 6, we've got Lincoln, a brand that should be dominating American luxury, but somehow keeps tripping over its own shoelaces. Lincoln has the history, the prestige, the presidential legacy. Seriously, this brand once chauffeured world leaders, but today, most people either confuse it with Ford or completely forget it exists unless they see an airport limo. And here's the problem: Lincoln has spent years trying to reinvent itself, but every time it takes a step forward, it mixes in 2 steps of why does this still feel like a fancy Ford? Critics constantly point out heavy platform sharing with Ford, lack of performance options, slow innovation compared to Cadillac, BMW, and Mercedes, and a lineup that keeps changing direction every few years. They ditched sedans, then tried luxury SUVs, then pushed quiet comfort, then pushed tech. It's like Lincoln can't decide who it wants to be. And while the Navigator is a hit, one popular model isn't enough to erase years of brand confusion. At number 5, we've got Oldsmobile, a brand that had over 100 years of history and still managed to die with almost no one noticing. Oldsmobile was once a pioneer. They built America's first mass-produced car, they introduced the automatic transmission, and for decades they were a symbol of innovation. But then everything fell apart. By the 1990s, Oldsmobile went through a full identity crisis. They tried to be sporty, then they tried to be futuristic, then they tried to be premium. In the end, they were none of those things. Just bland cars nobody really asked for. Models like the Alero, Bravada, Silhouette, and Intrigue failed to make an impact. They weren't bad enough to hate, but not good enough to love either. They were simply forgettable, and forgettable is the worst thing a car brand can be. Sales dropped year after year, and in 2004, GM finally pulled the plug. At number 4, we've got Saturn, a brand that started with big dreams and ended with one of the biggest letdowns in GM history. When Saturn launched in the 1980s, it was marketed as a different kind of car company. Fresh ideas, plastic body panels, no hassle pricing, a brand new manufacturing philosophy. This was supposed to be GM's answer to Toyota and Honda, but things went downhill fast. Saturn's cars weren't actually competitive. No, they were underpowered, cheaply built, and the interiors looked like they were designed by someone who hated color and happiness. The Ion? Weak. The L Series? A disaster. The Outlook? Too little, too late. And the Astra? A decent Opel rebadged into an identity crisis. The brand never lived up to the hype. GM didn't invest enough, the cars never caught up with Japanese reliability, and buyers quickly lost interest. By the late 2000s, Saturn sales were sinking fast, and during the recession, GM shut the brand down without hesitation. At number 3, we've got Pontiac, a brand that once stood for pure American performance, and somehow ended up becoming a meme in the car world. Let's be real, Pontiac used to be cool. The GTO, Firebird, Trans Am, absolute legends. But by the 2000s, the brand completely lost its identity and started pumping out cars that nobody asked for. The Aztec? One of the most hated designs in automotive history. The Montana minivan, forgettable. The G6, rental car energy. The Torrent, a rebadged Chevy with zero personality. Instead of building exciting performance cars, Pontiac slowly turned into GM leftovers with a different badge. And that killed the brand. By the time the recession hit, Pontiac was already on life support. Shrinking sales, boring models, and a reputation that faded fast. GM finally ended the brand in 2010, and honestly, car fans were sad about the classics, but had no trouble letting go of the modern lineup. At number 2, we've got Plymouth, a brand that started strong, dominated early American car sales, and then slowly collapsed into one of the most disappointing declines in US automotive history. Plymouth was huge in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, affordable, reliable, everywhere, and they created icons like the Barracuda, Roadrunner, and Superbird. For a while, Plymouth was untouchable, then the downfall hit. By the 1980s and 90s, Plymouth went from legendary muscle cars to budget boxes. The acclaimed, the Breeze. The neon cars so forgettable that most people wouldn't recognize them in a parking lot today. Plymouth's models lacked personality, lacked innovation, and worst of all, lacked identity. They were basically cheap Dodges wearing different badges, and buyers knew it. Sales tanked for years. And in 2001, Chrysler finally pulled the plug, ending one of the oldest American car brands with barely a whisper. And at number 1, the crown for the worst American car brand of all time goes to AMC. A company that somehow survived for decades while building some of the most confusing, questionable, and flat-out bizarre cars ever to hit US roads. AMC was the underdog of Detroit, always low on money, always cutting corners, and always trying to compete with giants like Ford, GM, and Chrysler, but failing in the most spectacular ways. Let's talk about the cars. The Gremlin, a subcompact that looked like someone designed a car and then forgot to finish the back half. The Pacer, massive doors, fishbowl windows, and styling. That turned it into a rolling punchline. The Matador, a car so odd that even police departments didn't want it. The Eagle, a weird mix of a wagon, a 4x4, and a trust me it's sporty attitude. It wasn't that AMC never tried, it's that they almost always had to do everything on the cheapest budget possible. So the build quality suffered, the engines lagged behind competition, and the designs, well, let's just say AMC took creative risks no one else wanted to take. By the 1980s, AMC was drowning. Their last hope was the Jeep brand, and when Chrysler bought AMC in 1987, they took Jeep and quietly let the rest of AMC fade into the history books. And that wraps up our list of the top 10 worst American car brands ever made. From forgotten failures to design disasters, we've seen the cars that made people shake their heads, laugh out loud, and sometimes wonder, who approved this? But hey, even the worst brands have stories worth telling. They shaped the industry, influenced design, and taught future automakers exactly what not to do. Now I want to hear from you. Which brand on this list do you think deserved its fate? And which one do you believe actually had potential? Maybe you owned one of these cars. Good or bad experience? Tell us in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly rankings and car deep dives. Thanks for watching Car Ranker. See you in the next countdown.